When the teenager said his father's name, Steve Harvey's face changed, and the show stopped right there. The studio lights were blinding as they always were. The familiar theme music had just faded. 300 people sat in the audience, cameras were rolling, and Steve Harvey stood at his podium with that signature smile everyone recognized. This was supposed to be just another taping of Family Feud, episode number 847 of the season. A regular Thursday afternoon in the Atlanta studios. But in exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, everything would change. Because sometimes, in the middle of manufactured entertainment and scripted banter, real life crashes through the studio walls. And when it does, no producer, no director, no carefully timed commercial break can stop what happens next. The Johnson family stood on stage left, 5 members lined up behind their podium. Typical American family, mother in her Sunday best, 2 younger siblings fidgeting nervously, an aunt who kept waving at the camera. And then there was Marcus, 17 years old, wearing his father's blue button-up shirt. The one that still smelled faintly of cologne and sawdust. The one he'd taken from the closet that morning, ignoring his mother's tears when she saw him put it on. Steve began his usual routine, walking down the line, microphone in hand, getting names, cracking jokes, building that rhythm that made Family Feud what it was. The audience laughed on cue. The competing family, the Robinsons, smiled from across the stage. Everything was going exactly as planned. "And what's your name, young man?" Steve asked, reaching Marcus at the end of the line. "Marcus Johnson, sir." "Marcus Johnson. That's a strong name. You here with your family today?" "Yes, sir. My mom, my brother, my sister, and my aunt." Steve noticed something then. A slight tremor in the kid's voice. The way his hand gripped the edge of the podium just a little too tight. 23 years of hosting television had taught Steve to read people, to sense when someone was carrying more than they were showing. "And your dad? Couldn't make it today?" The studio didn't know it yet, but those words would crack something open. Something that couldn't be closed again. Marcus's jaw tightened. His mother, standing 2 people down, closed her eyes. The aunt reached out, almost instinctively, placing a hand on the mother's shoulder. "My dad passed away, sir. 3 months ago." The laughter in the studio didn't stop immediately. Some people hadn't heard. Others were still processing. But Steve Harvey heard every syllable. Saw every micro-expression. And something in his chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with entertainment, and everything to do with being human. "Oh." Steve's smile faded. Not slowly, but instantly. Like someone had flipped a switch. "I'm sorry, son. I'm real sorry. It's okay, Mr. Harvey. He would have wanted to be here. He loved this show. We used to watch it together every night after he got home from work." Marcus's voice cracked on the word work. "He was a carpenter. Built houses. Built our house. Built everything." The cameras kept rolling because that's what cameras do. But everyone in the studio felt the shift. The temperature of the room changed. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something else. Steve Harvey had interviewed thousands of contestants. Heard countless stories. Made people laugh until they cried with his reactions and his timing. But this was different. This teenager, wearing his dead father's shirt, standing on national television trying to hold himself together. "What was your father's name?" Steve asked quietly. "David. David Johnson." And that's when it happened. Steve Harvey stopped the show. Not paused it. Stopped it. He turned to the producers in the booth, made a cutting motion across his throat, and said into his microphone, "Hold up. Cut the music. Cut everything." The upbeat game show background music died. The audience murmurs faded to confused silence. Production assistants looked at each other, uncertain. The director in the control room spoke into Steve's earpiece, probably saying something about the schedule, about the taping, about time and money and contracts. Steve pulled the earpiece out and set it on his podium. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. Because some moments don't fit into the format. He walked away from his mark, stepped around the podium, crossed the stage to where Marcus stood. The teenager's eyes were red now, fighting tears, probably embarrassed that he was showing emotion on camera, probably wishing he'd held it together better. Steve Harvey, one of the most recognized faces in entertainment, stood in front of a 17-year-old kid and did something that wasn't in any script. He opened his arms. "Come here, son!" Marcus broke. That careful composure he'd been maintaining shattered. He stepped into Steve's embrace and the tears came, silent at first, then with shaking shoulders. His mother covered her mouth, her own tears falling. His siblings, who'd probably been trying to be strong for their brother, started crying too. The aunt wrapped her arms around all of them. The studio audience sat in absolute silence. Some wiped their eyes. Others clutched their chests. A woman in the third row was openly sobbing. The Robinson family, the competing team, weren't smiling anymore. They were human beings watching another human being grieve, and competition meant nothing in that moment. Steve held Marcus for what felt like an hour but was probably 30 seconds. When he finally stepped back, he kept his hands on the teenager's shoulders. "Listen to me," Steve said, and his voice had that quality it gets when he's not performing, when he's just Steve. "Your father is here. You understand me? David Johnson is in this building right now. He's in that shirt you're wearing. He's in the way you stand. He's in your voice when you talk. And he's proud of you, son. I don't need to have known him to know that." Marcus nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his handkerchief. Custom embroidered, probably expensive. He handed it to Marcus. "Keep it. That's yours now." Then Steve did something else unexpected. He took off his jacket. His signature gray suit jacket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He draped it around Marcus's shoulders. "You wear that for the rest of this show," Steve said. "You wear your father's shirt and my jacket, and we're going to play this game. And we're going to honor David Johnson by showing everybody watching that his son is strong, that his family is strong, and that love doesn't stop just because someone's not physically here anymore." The audience erupted. Not with applause, but with something deeper. A standing ovation that came from the gut, from that place where humans recognize humanity. The Robinson family started clapping too, and then they did something beautiful. The father from their family walked across the stage, past all protocol and competition, and shook Marcus's hand. Then he hugged him. "My dad died when I was 16. He said, quiet enough that only those close by could hear, but the microphones caught it anyway. You're going to be okay. It doesn't feel like it now, but you're going to be okay. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." The game resumed, but it wasn't really a game anymore. It was something else. Marcus played wearing Steve's jacket over his father's shirt. Every answer he gave, Steve encouraged him, not as a host, but as someone who genuinely cared. When Marcus got an answer right, Steve's celebration was real. When he missed one, Steve reminded him, "Your dad's still proud." The Johnson family didn't win. The final score was Robinson family 387, Johnson family 312. But when the final bell rang, nobody cared about the score. Both families met in the middle of the stage. The Robinsons insisted the Johnsons take their prize too, splitting the winnings between them. Steve stood off to the side, watching, and if you looked closely you could see his eyes were red. After the cameras officially stopped rolling, after the audience had been released and the stage crew started breaking down equipment, Steve Harvey did one more thing. He called Marcus over to the side of the stage, away from everyone else. From his wallet he pulled out a card. Not a business card. Something else. A photograph, worn at the edges from being carried around. It showed a young Steve Harvey, maybe in his 20s, standing next to an older man with the same smile. "That's my father," Steve said. "Jesse Harvey. Coal miner. Hardest working man I ever knew. He died in 2000. 23 years ago. And I still talk to him. Still ask him for advice. Still feel him in the room sometimes. He turned the photograph over. On the back, in faded ink, was a phone number. That's my personal number, Steve said. Not my assistant, not my manager. Mine. You call that number any time, day or night, and if I can answer, I will. You understand? You're not alone in this. Your father built you strong, but that doesn't mean you have to carry everything by yourself. Marcus took the photograph with shaking hands. I can't take this, Mr. Harvey. This is your father. That's exactly why you can take it, Steve said. Because I know what it means. And I know your father would do the same thing for another kid who lost his dad. We take care of each other. That's what men who love their fathers do. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. 3 months after the episode aired, Marcus Johnson called that number. It was 2 in the morning. He'd been sitting in his father's workshop, the one his dad had built in their garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects. He was crying, overwhelmed by college applications and family responsibilities and the weight of becoming the man of the house at 17. Steve Harvey answered on the 3rd ring. They talked for an hour. Steve didn't give platitudes or easy answers. He talked about his own father, about losing him, about the guilt of success when your dad isn't there to see it, about how grief doesn't follow a schedule or a logical path, about how it's okay to fall apart sometimes. At the end of the call, Steve said something that Marcus would later say changed his life. Your father didn't just leave you memories. He left you a blueprint. You're built from the same material he was. And that material doesn't break easy. Marcus kept Steve's jacket. Kept the handkerchief. Kept the photograph. But more than that, he kept the lesson. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That asking for help is strength. That grief is love that has nowhere to go, so you find new places to put it. He started a scholarship fund at his high school in his father's name. David Johnson Memorial Fund for students who'd lost parents. Steve Harvey donated the first $50,000. By the end of the first year, they'd raised over $300,000. Marcus worked construction every summer, using his father's tools, learning the trade David Johnson had mastered. When Marcus graduated high school, Steve sent flowers. When he got into college, Steve sent a video message that Marcus played at his graduation party. When Marcus got married at 25, there was a gift from Steve and his wife Marjorie, a set of professional carpenter's tools with a note that read, David would want you to have these. Keep building. The episode aired 6 weeks after it was taped. The producers knew they had something special. They put it in prime time. The ratings were unprecedented. But more than ratings, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of people who'd lost parents wrote in, sharing their stories. A man in Ohio who'd been contemplating suicide said watching Steve's compassion saved his life. A woman in Florida reconnected with her estranged children. A teenager in Texas told his mother he loved her for the first time in years. Steve rarely talks about that episode in interviews. When pressed, he usually just says, I did what any person with a heart would do. But his team says it changed him. Made him more present. More willing to break format when something real happened. More interested in moments than in making moments. Share and subscribe to make sure this story is never forgotten. The jacket Marcus wore that day hangs in his home office now, framed in a shadow box next to a photograph of his father. His own children, David Jr. and Stephen, named after both his father and Steve Harvey, sometimes ask to touch it. Marcus tells them the story of the day their grandfather's spirit filled a television studio, and how a stranger became family because he chose compassion over commerce. Steve Harvey has hosted thousands of episodes of Family Feud. He's given away millions of dollars. He's made millions of people laugh. But if you ask the people who work with him, they'll tell you that the episode with Marcus Johnson is the one that defines what Steve Harvey really is. Not a comedian. Not a host. Not a celebrity. A man who understands that the most important thing you can do is see someone else's pain and not look away. David Johnson never got to watch his son on Family Feud. Never got to see Steve Harvey put his jacket on Marcus's shoulders. Never got to witness the way his son held himself together, and then let himself break, and then put himself back together stronger. But maybe he did. Maybe that's what Steve meant when he said David was in the building that day. Maybe that's what all the people in the studio felt when the lights seemed warmer, and the air seemed thicker, and time seemed to stop. Because love doesn't need a body to fill a room. It just needs someone willing to honor it. And that day, in a game show studio in Atlanta, a 17-year-old boy and a television host showed the world exactly what that looks like.